Hello, my name's Rob. I'm the CEO of Giraffe, and over the next 10 to 15, I'm going to do a video explaining how I use the tool that we've designed to do urban design. So I'm going to be looking at this street, Victoria Street, this site here, sorry, north of George Street, south of Victoria Street West, these two sort of blocks here, as a fictional example of a project. Not a real project, but one which may be real. So let's create a new project. I'm just going to draw the boundary. And I'm going to rough it in because I don't really mind. We can always adjust it later. And I'm going to call it Burwood Project. And then we're going to be in. So now we're in the project. And the first thing I want to do is I've got some nice, contextual data here. Obviously, I would have done my site visit, so I kind of know the landscape. I may have taken some notes. But the first thing I want to do is add some spatial layers. So I'm going to look up some heritage layers. I think zoning will be important. Giraffe has sort of thousands of layers inside of it, and so that's why we do this search mechanism. You can preset it, so you don't have to do it laborious every time. Imagery, I'm going to get the New South Wales public imagery, and I think height of building would be a good one to get. There it is. Okay, so we've got the cadastre, heritage, land use, and public imagery. I think that's pretty good. So if we turn on the nice New South Wales public imagery, we can actually see our site in sort of full Technicolor. And let's just turn on heritage because obviously Burwood's an old part of Sydney with a lot of heritage items. And in our site, there's these two heritage items: this old house here and these terraces here. So we're obviously going to respond to them. I think before we get into the design, it probably makes sense to sort of note some of the key context. So there's a big mall here, which is important because for the sake of this example, let's say that we've been tasked with designing a mixed-use centre, so that's some retail, some residential, and maybe some community uses. And so obviously nearby retail would need to be brought to our client and the government's attention. So I'm also going to mark off Burwood Road as something that's key. Okay, so now there are these two train stations, one here and one here. Our site is much closer to Burwood train station, so what I might do is start mapping some of the movement through the site. So, these residential buildings, which look like some apartments and some sort of houses, the way they would take, the routes they would take to get to Burwood station, and there may also be another route. If you can see here, it looks like a pedestrian connection through to Main Street. And you can imagine some of the people who lived here and didn't like the main road may sort of filter through Gloucester Avenue. So I mean, even as we're drawing this, we're starting to get an idea of the size of these things. It's 120 meters, so it's pretty significant. So I'll call that a main connection as well. I guess the one other one I would like to mark out is, this Conda Street, and then you come across here. So if you're on the south side of the tracks and you want to get to our development, which we're hopefully going to make really awesome, this is another route that you may take if you don't come from here. Okay, so the way we design, or I design often, is just to chuck some stuff down. So I'm obviously not going to go over that heritage, and then see what it looks like on the page, and then iterate on it. I think this is the kind of the view of design that I think is really productive and really helpful. So I may just actually, because we know these heritage items are so important, I'll just highlight them like this. And so I've just chucked big two stories of retail on that eastern part of the site. I can look at it in 3D, I can look at it in 2D, and I've done that because that's that's the biggest slab of site. This bit of site here is far closer to these smaller buildings, smaller residential buildings, and I think if we turn on the 3D buildings layer, the height of buildings layer rather, you can actually see that's the intent. So you can see this purple, I'm looking south, so this purple mass here represents the height of buildings to the east of our site, which is much higher, and then they want them to step down to the west of our site and then down again to this green, which is quite low. So there's this gradient across the site, which you can see in the height of buildings. You can also see that in the zoning. So, chucking a big form here makes sense, and we'd actually want to sort of gradient the form down, and actually sort of look to that. So I can draw like a little I'm going to escape that and just draw a rectangle. I could draw a little residential mass, and I may just stick to the alignment of those buildings. So call that residential. I don't think it'll be 10 stories. Call it not 9. Call it 6 for now. And I think this idea that I have is taking this heritage site, cadastre, and extending it through these two buildings and turning it into a landscape that sort of sleeves this heritage and allows it to be, to breathe and to be celebrated as a new public park. And why is my instinct telling me to do that? I mean, there's this nice park up here. There's a park over there. There's a tiny little pocket park, which may even be a bit of a school over here. But there's not actually a lot of green space around here. So opening this up a little bit, I think, is going to give some value to the heritage, and as well as this retail that I've actually started already laying down. So let me finish my thought, which is sort of a bigger lot this way, and maybe an L shape. So we're going to do some single loaded retail, which is about 10 meters deep, 2 meters of corridor, 8 meters of apartment. I can do the same here, and I can do the same here. And if we do that, and maybe we actually blow this stuff out this way, this landscape, we're starting to get some built form that actually looks good in plan but doesn't look too good in 3D. So let's drop this down to 4 stories. And obviously the other thing that we need to do is draw a tower over here. So I'll just plonk say a 44 by 22 meter tower on this little podium I've made. The podium's sprung to the top, so let's put it at the bottom. And I can obviously add some stories to that tower there. Okay, if I look at the data, we're looking at about how much? 15,000 square meters of residential. That's net at about an 80% efficiency, which equates to 256 dwellings, most of which are 1 bed and 2 bed because of the inputs we've put. And I may just quickly model in this heritage building, since I know it's going to be there forever. I'm not going to move it. And let's call it community. Let's call it a 2-story community use for now. And we can sort of come back to that as well. I mean, I guess the difference between drawing by hand and drawing on the computer is the computer is infinitely malleable. So you draw something, if it doesn't work, you just change it. Whereas drawing by hand becomes a little, obviously it's a bit more laborious to change it. Okay, so now we've actually got a little plan. So a lot of this has come instinctually from me, from my site visits, and there's a movement of scale from the east to the west, and also maybe a movement of height. I may even say, look, I'll actually gradient down from this height nicely down to these low scale buildings. I've started to put a nice, I guess, green curtilage around this heritage building, which can be really nice. And what's also cool is, it's opening up this frontage, so there'll be something really attractive about this bit here, and I'll invite you in. And what I actually see is a potential connection here. So I'll call that a path. And that leads you straight to this retail, or it could be the lobby to this. It probably is retail rather than the lobby to this tower. You don't really want a lobby, I don't think, as like the terminus of a connection. Others may disagree. And of course, this whole plan, may be disagreed with. I wouldn't be offended if people disagree. But if we make a nice space here, actually align it with this park, we're starting to get something kind of cool. I'm just going to model in this road just to see what it feels like. So I'll build a road. I think it's, if I just turn on the cadastre, yeah, a bit more. I'll turn the heritage down and that down. Oop, too far. We can see that road's actually a bit thicker, so I think it's probably about, yeah, that's about right. So it's about 9 meters, yeah, with a 2 meter pavement. Could be about right. Let's leave it for now. And this is actually capturing my attention quite well. So I want this traffic slowing thing. So this road exists, but we have this kind of, it's semi-pedestrianised here. I guess now we know we can talk about this as, this we're going to retain. So I'm just going to mass it up, and I'm going to call it retail for sure. So I think that's 2 stories. And now we've got this, yeah, now I think things are actually starting to work pretty well. So we've got this tower, we've got these this gradient of form, we've got this little park which is connected. I may drop in some trees just to show what I mean by this sort of this front stuff coming in, and I'll just make them simple round trees. And this one can be a round tree too. Tree, round, tree, round. Sorry, that's quite laborious, but it shows that this is a sort of a moment which draws people in. And down. I mean, you may argue that you pull this back somewhat and kind of sort of build a bit of a throat so that people coming from this area will be dragged through the development. It also does argue definitely that this should be a bit of retail. So I may actually say that the bottom stories are retail. So let's lower them down and call them retail. Okay, and put them at the bottom. So if we have this retail here, maybe this stays pure residential, connecting to this residential across here. Starting to get kind of cool. This is to the south. This green is to the south of this building mass, so we may do something. We may pull it back somewhat, just so that there's some sun through here, and we could pull this back as well, or back like that. It's starting to float a little bit as residential, but we can deal with that later. And I guess the last thing I'd want to talk about really is this laneway. Or what I'm thinking is a laneway. It's sort of kind of a bit more urban. If I just pop the 3D buildings on or turn this imagery off, you can kind of see there's like these big towers here. So this is going to become a bit gritty and a bit grungy, which I like. People may not, but we've got the nice park area, so let's get some other character. And so I'm thinking of like a little tiny laneway where people can walk here, and this retail, and this, the back ends of those terraces that we have in the 3D. If I turn on the imagery again, this kind of like variegated urban form, which we can actually kind of suggest a bit like this if we wanted, becomes really, I think, attractive and valuable. So there's this nice back end here of, I don't know, bit dirty but bit fun. Then there's this nice, obviously the beautiful front end on this main street, which is a bit more formal. Then there's the character of this landscape area. The last thing I may do is pull that back and suggest some car park. So if I pull that to there, and there, I think we can just call that car park, and I think that will. That's way high, so we want that probably closer to 3 levels and put it down at the bottom. Yeah, so 3 levels of car park is equal to 2 levels of retail, which makes sense. And that car park would probably be accessed through there, potentially. We may pull this back and have it accessed through here, but that can be sorted out later. I think after the few minutes we've spent, I'm pretty excited about where we've managed to get. I mean, this is obviously too small, but I think we've made quite a lot of progress. And I think the last thing I could do is in the chat, I could share the project. I'll share it with Lucy, who is in my company and who can help me. And I'll say, hey Lucy, please have a look. Concerned about Resi on the west and making a laneway character in the east. Also, do you know anything about the Westfield? And she will get that note and she can start responding. If not, next time I see her, at least I've got the note there. So hopefully you can see how Giraffe sort of starts to be used quite quickly and gets you towards, contextual data, a little modeling tool, and then a lot of information so we know how many residents, open space, dwellings, as well as a simple financial model very, very quickly. And that can then be shared with your team or your client. Yeah, before you know it, you're sort of scrambling towards a solution that kind of makes sense. And of course, everything you see here is disputable and can be changed, but that's the beauty, I guess, of design and collaborative, agile urban design.